All right, so going back to the beginning, I'm going to introduce my team one more time. You know who I am. I hope you at least heard my name. Then we've got Melissa Bernasek, who's the Director of Information Services here. We've got Phil Schneider, who's our Digital Services Librarian. We've got Stacy Michael, our Public Programs Manager, and Shanna Lopez, our Technology Education Associate. So, we're going to talk today about why people are difficult, and then we're going to walk you through 5 different profiles of customers we encounter a lot. Angry Alan, Persistent Pam, Rule Bender Rita, No Boundaries Nora, Inappropriate Ian, talk to you about worst case scenario ideas, and then that demo of Gail's toolkit like Joe mentioned. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We all good? Yay! So we know from working with the public that there are a host of things that cause people to get upset. Frequent things in libraries entail removing materials from the collection, adding materials to the collection, failing to have space, equipment, materials, and so on available for use, blocking privileges until materials are returned or fines are paid, asking patrons to cease inappropriate or disruptive behaviors, and asking customers to wait while we help someone else. We know the list is truly much longer, but those are some of the common ones in libraries. At the root of things, it seems like there's 4 main reasons why people get angry. They're buried under piles of pressures, disappointments, or irritations, and the situation involving us is just the last thing they can take. They don't feel acknowledged for their wait, their patience while waiting, their disappointment, or whatever it may be. Because we fail to address the human aspect, they've unknowingly become Mount Vesuvius just waiting to erupt. Whatever we're telling them might be in conflict with their personal values. Perhaps they believe the library should be a social space and don't agree with a rule asking them to be quiet on the 2nd floor, or maybe they think their tax money should be spent on physical items that they can see and touch instead of electronic databases. Whatever it is, value conflict certainly can turn reasonable people into powder kegs, especially if there are other factors adding to their frustration. And at the end of the day, we're all human, right? Emotions are unpredictable, plain and simple, and external factors can cause reasonable people to behave in unreasonable ways. Things like low blood sugar because you hadn't had time to eat, feeling rushed, being ill, dealing with traffic, and being tired can affect people's ability to stay calm and cool. So now that we've talked about some common reasons why people get upset, we're going to start walking you through 5 profiles that encompass some of our most challenging customers. While we can't guarantee that our techniques will work on everyone, they work on most people with a bit of practice. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Melissa Bernasek, who's going to talk to you about Angry Alan. Melissa?
Thank you, Monica, and good afternoon, everyone. Many of you are familiar with Angry Alan, as he is arguably the most common type of difficult customer. In fact, every one of us may have been an Angry Alan at some point. For some reason, Alan is just having a hard time. He's agitated and on edge. Perhaps he is impatient because he can't finish his tasks fast enough, or frustrated because his lack of skills contribute to that inefficiency. Many customers will stop there. They will grumble to themselves and maybe even ask for help. But no, not Alan. Alan's grumbling will transform into blame or demanding a resolution. Sometimes the blame is benign and evidence of frustration, such as blaming the self-check machine for not working correctly. Other times it becomes the library's fault. Either way, Alan just needs to be heard. He will interrupt what you are doing, no matter if you are on the phone or speaking to another customer, because he has reached boiling point. He will raise his voice in an effort to get his problem solved faster. Alan will start demanding a resolution right now. Your efforts to help him may still be too slow in his eyes. Sometimes he will start making unreasonable demands, such as his prints being free, because of course, it's the printer's fault. Try not to roll your eyes when helping him. Just because he doesn't know how to use a printer, that doesn't mean he gets everything for free. If he begins to use offensive language or tells a staff person, "You don't know how to do your job," then you are seeing the absolute worst of Alan. It is one thing to give an opinion on the library policy and another to verbally attack a person. The angriest Alan will cross the line into targeted exclamations and expletives. At his worst, Alan is still the least of your problems. Although he can demonstrate inappropriate behavior, he will not go beyond cussing and demeaning staff. Once Alan is gone, peace is rapidly restored. Sometimes people like Alan will look around as they are speaking to see if they can gain some support. Typically, no one will step forward, but people nearby are still affected by the interruption. Stares from other customers will confirm that this is not considered acceptable behavior. In extreme cases, other customers will even back away or move somewhere else to work and are generally not affected once Alan stops shouting. Staff may exhibit signs of stress following such an interaction. And who wouldn't? No one likes to be yelled at. Library workers are passionate about helping others, so demands that spew from Alan's mouth can feel like an attack. Once Alan leaves, you can visibly see staff breathe a sigh of relief and greet the next customer with a smile. But continual exposure to this type of situation will certainly increase workplace stress and decrease morale. Certainly no library staff likes to play lunch lady and correct patron behavior, but we can all agree that a disruption like this is unfavorable. Unfortunately, sometimes it is also unavoidable. To restore order, deal with Alan as quickly as possible. Disruptions such as these must not be permitted to go on and on. Empower your staff to blur the lines of policies to satisfy the customer. The faster the transaction ends, the better. But remember, there's a difference between blurring lines and becoming a pushover. For example, if you give permission for staff to waive overdue fines, you must still provide limitations. If it's over $20, call me for approval. We should be sympathetic, but not stomped on. All staff who work with customers should be trained in proven de-escalation methods. These techniques keep staff and customers safe. Sometimes calling a manager is necessary, and staff should know when to do this. As I tell the employees I manage, I don't pay you to be yelled at. Let me take the heat. It is always better for staff to call a manager before angry Alan demands to talk to someone. When the problem is resolved and Alan has left, make sure your staff feel that they can walk away from the public desk for a breather. Everyone deserves a few minutes to cool off and regroup after a heated conversation. While we all know that Alan is just agitated and frustrated, letting his comments roll off our backs can be easier said than done. Recognize that less seasoned staff may not be so resilient. Managers should talk with new staff individually to make sure they aren't feeling stressed. Unfortunately, dealing with people like Alan is just part of customer service. Sometimes a little humor can help diffuse stress as well. Just make sure the comments are private. A simple observation like, "Did you see how red his face was? I thought he was going to explode," is a good way to laugh it off. Just make sure it is followed up with a confirmation that staff responded correctly. Now it's time for a summary. Recently, hold on. Sorry everyone, we're having a little bit of audio conflict. One moment.
Can you hear us? Sorry guys.
What's going on here?
Testing the mic, testing.
I didn't hear any feedback there, Stacy, so I think we're okay.
Sorry, everyone. Let's continue with the story. Can you all hear me now without any feedback? No screeching or squealing? I'll look for some chat responses. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. Let's continue. Recently, I observed an encounter with an angry Alan who was trying to make copies of tax forms. The library employee responsible for the copy machines greeted the customer and asked if he needed assistance. Alan mumbled, "No," and set about making copies. Several minutes later, he stomped over to the help desk, insisting that our copy machines were broken because they did not produce what he wanted. Alan was already agitated and frustrated. When the employee inquired about what he was trying to do, his first answer was, "Why doesn't this work right? I'm just trying to make copies." The employee remained calm and mentally recognized that the customer had probably already wasted at least $1 in addition to his time. While the employee looked at his originals and tried to make sense of what he wanted, Alan became increasingly impatient. Clearly, this task was already taking much longer than he had intended. He kept trying to interrupt her thought process and try other solutions. Customers nearby looked up and stared as his voice got louder. "Is this going to take a long time?" The staff member made the quick and correct decision to just take over the transaction. With a smile, she said, "Why don't I just make these copies for you?" She grabbed 3 dimes from the cash drawer, confidently stepped in front of the machine, and the man backed off. When the job was done, he even said thank you. As a manager, I applauded my employee's ability to solve the problem. I can only hope that next time Alan will accept help from the start. Next, we are going to hear from Phil, who is going to step it up a notch with Persistent Pam. Phil?
Thank you, Melissa. Next, we're going to talk about the type of problem customer that I deal with most regularly. This person is called Persistent Pam. Pam is usually a very nice lady who comes in looking for help. I'm always happy to help her, but I need to remember her pleasant personality makes it hard to cut her off and tell her no. If you do not remember to keep Pam in check, she could take up large portions of your time, causing you and your coworkers all sorts of problems. Pam's the most common characteristic is she loves to talk and tell stories for days. She never seems to run out of them, and she never gets tired of retelling you the same stories. Pam often does this because she really likes to talk and oftentimes is lonely and needs someone to listen to her. If you give Pam great service, she will often get attached to you and refuse help from other staff members. In rare cases, Pam will even try to get your phone number or meet you outside of work. Pam also tends to ask for the same thing over and over again. In extreme situations, Pam will even try to get you to do her work for her because she thinks that you can do it so much better than she ever could. Finally, every once in a while, Pam will have a problem that needs to be solved so badly she refuses to believe that you cannot assist her. In cases like this, Pam has met up with dire circumstances or may have a mental illness. This is a very difficult situation where you need to try to get her help as quickly and delicately as possible. From the outside, Pam seems harmless, but she can really cause major problems within your organization. Pam's neediness can take up large amounts of your time as well as that of other staff members. This can cause a great loss of productivity and a waste of tax dollars. If too much time is spent on Pam, it could affect the ability to finish projects or tasks, as well as helping other customers. If things get bad enough, you may miss other obligations or even start asking other coworkers to help you complete your tasks. This can lead to a toxic work environment in which you and your colleagues become aggravated and stressed. This should be avoided at all costs. Luckily, Pam is usually understanding, and it rarely takes extremes to keep her time use in check. With some simple strategies, you can easily curtail Pam and prevent her from draining you and your coworkers' time. When dealing with Pam, your main goal needs to be to answer her questions and move on as fast as possible without being rude or upsetting her. This may not always be possible, but is what you should strive for with every interaction. Pam usually tells 3 types of stories to extend her time with you. These types are short anecdotes, long drawn-out stories, and sob stories. Short anecdotes should not typically be interrupted. Not only do these stories help you build a relationship with your customer, enhancing their experience, but it increases retention rates by allowing them to make connections with what they've just learned. If Pam is telling too many of these stories, though, make sure to refocus her back to the task at hand. Long stories can be a very serious problem. Often one story leads to another, creating a situation where Pam could talk at you forever. The instant you recognize this happening, try to refocus her back to the task or end the interaction. Not only will the initial story take a long time, but it will create a precedent where the customer will think telling you long stories is an acceptable behavior, leading to multiple time-wasting interactions. The final story she tells is a sob story. These are the most difficult to deal with because emotions are high. Often people are stressed and upset and just need to vent. So be empathetic and listen. After the story is over, the customer will have built up a positive relationship with you and will walk away thinking very highly of the library. In more troubling situations, Pam is not venting and actually really needs help. Listen to her story, empathize, and try to come up with a way for her to get the help she needs. When you have figured out you're dealing with a Pam, there are several ways about going about refocusing her. You should always try to be polite and considerate, but firm. One of my favorite phrases to use is, let's get back to figuring out, and then whatever question you're working on at the time. Another great phrase to try is, we are running low on time. Let's get back to the question. This phrase is highly effective because it will remind Pam there is a time limit. This will often cause Pam to apologize, work faster, and sometimes even cut herself off early, and so that she could come finish up another day. If you have finished answering a question and Pam gets sidetracked, ask her what the next question is. She'll usually ask her next question and forget all about what she was previously talking about. If she continues to talk, you now have a question to work on, allowing you to stay productive during her story. If it is obvious that the transaction is complete, but Pam is still regaling about some particularly epic tale, ask her if there's anything else you can help her with today. If she says no but continues talking, start engaging in other strategies to avoid having your time wasted. If the transaction gets to the point where Pam has been helped and she is still talking with no end in sight, you need to formulate an exit strategy. One of the most effective and easy strategies is to start helping another customer. You can interrupt Pam by saying, sorry, but I need to help another customer at this time. Pam usually gets the point by now, or at the very least gets bored of waiting for your attention and leaves. If you are the kind of person that does not mind being blunt, you can simply tell Pam that you are very busy and you need to get back to work. From here, avoid eye contact with Pam and continue to work until she leaves. This method can be seen as rude by Pam, and I try to use it as a last resort. If none of this works, then leaving the area is a necessity. You can do this by telling Pam that you have a meeting or some other excuse, and just leave until she vacates the premises. If you see Pam keeping another one of your colleagues hostage, call that coworker, pretending that you need help in the workroom immediately, or that the boss needs to talk to them. They can then walk away from Pam with a seemingly valid excuse and end the transaction. In the most severe cases, Pam keeps coming back over and over again. She needs to have it explained to her that she's acting inappropriately. This needs to be done by a person in authority, such as a manager, department head, director, or even security. They can then decide how to move on and help you deal with Pam in the future. The best and most effective way to keep Pam from spending too much of your time is to schedule how much time you spend with her. Often Pam will just show up at the desk and expect that someone will spend an extended period of time with her, no matter what her problem may be. Let Pam know that you have many other customers to help, and that setting up an appointment time would give her your uninterrupted attention. When you have an appointment with her, make it clear how much time you'll be spending with her, so she is aware of time limits. I like to make 1 to 2 hour appointments depending on the customer's needs, but you should make appointments based off of your resources and the guidelines set by your library. Now when Pam gets close to going over in time, instead of cutting her off, you can instead set up another appointment with her at a later date to finish up. This allows you to budget your time with her far more effectively. Remember, this does not work if you allow Pam to go over on time. Do not allow her to run roughshod over you. Be firm with your time limit. Since Pam always tries to go over on time, start wrapping up early by telling her that this is the last question she could ask 10 to 15 minutes before her time is up. 5 minutes before the appointment is over, stand up and stretch, and start talking about setting up another appointment to encourage her to start packing up. If librarian appointments are popular, or if you have a lot of groupies, you may not have enough time to help everyone and get your work done. Remember, you can always say no to a customer and inform them you do not have enough time for them right now. Another option is to try to find another staff member who can take that customer. Even though it is difficult, it is okay to start a transaction with a customer and allow a coworker to finish it up. Finally, I'm going to tell you a quick story about a Pam that I've dealt with when I first started working at Galeborn. Pam originally called and needed help stopping Russian hackers from destroying her computer. I originally found her books on computer security, but eventually realized her problem was really that she did not know how to use a computer properly. I informed her when the library was offering Windows classes and even made a few librarian appointments to help her properly use her new laptop. She was so pleased with the quality of my help that she started calling several times a week for long periods of time and would only talk to me. She began with a request and would then tell me endless stories about court cases and people out to get her. I felt bad for Pam, and it made it really hard for me to say no to her requests. It soon got out of control, and we had to talk to her about using library resources properly. This seemed to do the trick. Pam still calls every now and then, but she calls for appropriate requests and no longer refuses help from other staff members. Next, Monica is going to tell us about Rule Bender Rita.
Thank you, Phil. So hopefully you guys can hear me. So Persistent Pam's first cousin is Rule Bender Rita. And I call them cousins because you'll notice some similarities between their tactics. The big difference is that Rita's focused on getting an exception to some kind of policy, rule, or practice, and she employs manipulations and passive-aggressive behavior to try to get her way. Rita's smart, a little too smart actually, and she uses those smarts to try to outwit us. She knows what the policy is, but somehow thinks it doesn't or shouldn't apply to her. In her mind, the policy is for everyone else. She builds rapport with staff in an attempt to manipulate us later, and while she truly may be a nice person, her motivation is a selfish one. She's the customer who says things like, "Come on, you know me." When we tell her no, she flatters, she presses, she explains, she cajoles, and she pleads. When she's unsuccessful in her attempts to persuade us, she turns argumentative, hostile, insulting, and irate. In her alpha form, she may threaten to go over our heads, refuse to allow us to help her, insult us, and use profanity and inappropriate gestures to cause a scene. In short, Rita can be a real tough customer who drains us of our patience, gets on our last nerve, and makes us shake our head in disbelief. Rita thrives on power and control, and forcing us to cave to her demands leaves her feeling accomplished. Is something off in Rita's genetic makeup? Was she socialized by narcissists? Did someone take advantage of her and now she's turned on the world? We'll never know the psychology behind her behavior, but understanding her tactics allows us to prepare for a more positive interaction. So next, let's talk about some of the many problems Rita causes when she visits our library. First, she disrupts patrons and staff. It takes time to flatter people, to build relationships, to argue, and to pout, which means Rita has to hang around while staff's trying to work. If she leaves the desk, she has less chance of wearing us down and getting hurt. Yes. Rita's confrontational. She knows through past experience that if she confronts us when others are around, she is more likely to get her way because, well, no one likes the scene, right? She's not above turning into a full-fledged bully and doesn't care who's around to see it. Rita encourages inconsistency. She doesn't care if another patron sees us making an exception for her and gets upset. In Rita's mind, that's for us to deal with, not her, and the other customer would be wise to follow her lead. One of the worst things about dealing with Rita is that the interactions with her are long. Because she takes a manipulative approach, there's no quick and easy reference question with Rita. If we help her find an app, next she wants us to install and configure it on her phone. If we recommend a research database, she expects us to find, select, and print an appropriate full-text article free of charge. She also creates conflict among staff members because not everyone takes the same approach with her. Those of us who are comfortable with conflict may take a hard line, while those who are not may bend the rules. Over time, this not only helps Rita learn to work the system, but also causes hard feelings because Rita expects the same service from everyone. Finally, because Rita's prone to name dropping and asking for the next person up when she doesn't get what she wants, she creates unnecessary escalation. This problem is compounded if the next person up bends the rule because it gives Rita a new model to work. You tell me no, I speak to your boss says yes, oh, I get my way. This goes back to the previous talking point, creates conflict among staff. By saying yes, my boss has just encouraged Rita to skip the chain of command and visit her directly if Rita doesn't like the answer she receives. I hope my boss enjoys her new friend. So now that we've discussed the problems Rita creates, how do we work with her in a professional manner without succumbing to her terror tactics? First, we need to be cognizant of the fact that Rita's tactics work best when an audience is present and try to move the interaction with her to a less public area. A table off to the side or even an OPAC station at the end of a shelving unit are excellent choices. Losing the public performance aspect is a blow to Rita and can be key in getting her to listen. Say things in simple terms so she can understand them when telling her why you won't bend the rules. For example, once our computer classes are in session for 5 minutes, we don't allow anyone else to enter the room because it disrupts the class. A fact-based response delivered in a calm manner, like, at 7 p.m. your spot was filled by someone on the wait list, so unfortunately there are no more seats, can work well on a Rita. Another trick is to tell Rita what you can do for her in lieu of what she's requesting. Using the last example, something like, let's check the calendar and get you registered for the next class is a good option. However, if Rita doesn't like your answer and is turned into Angry Alan, which happens, problem solving won't be an option. It may even be necessary to address her behavior head-on with a phrase like, Rita, I listened while you spoke and I need you to do the same. I know you don't like my answer, but let's focus on solving the problem and remain courteous in how we deal with each other. Being firm about expectations for courtesy is important with Rita because she's probably a frequent visitor who you'll see again and again, and you must set the stage with her now for future interactions. If Rita can't regain control of her behavior, politely end the conversation with something like, Rita, I understand what you're asking me to do, and I'm sorry, but I can't make that happen. Is there anything else I can help you with before I move on to the next customer? She won't like it when we shut her down, but if we've reached an impasse, it's the only course of action that will put the power back in our hands and make it clear to Rita that we are moving on. Regardless of which tactic or combination of tactics we choose, it's important to advise coworkers of the situation so they're aware of Rita's game. Whether we include it in a daily report, record it in a log, or send an email makes no difference, only that we keep folks in the loop so they can brush up on their rule vendor management skills before they become face-to-face with Rita. Now, Let me tell you a story about my experience with one rule-bending Rita at my library. We had a patron who started attending our device advice program, which is for district residents who want one-on-one help with their mobile devices. Because it was a drop-in program and our sign-in sheet didn't verify residency, Rita was able to attend for several months before we found out she wasn't a card holder. Now, if program attendance had been low and she'd only have a couple of quick questions, we may have helped her anyway, but this wasn't the case with Rita. The program was popular, she had the same questions week after week, and she wanted staff to do all the work for her even when other patrons were waiting. I had no choice but to step in and tell this Rita that she could no longer attend. I tried to set the stage for a positive interaction by exchanging pleasantries, asking if we could talk privately, and moving our meeting to a comfy sofa on the other side of the room. However, as soon as I broke the bad news, she started in with a sequence of escalating rule bender tactics. First, she tried to manipulate my emotions by telling me sad stories about her situation, similar to Persistent Pam. Next, she pleaded for me to make an exception because her library didn't offer a program like device advice. When that didn't work, she demanded that I let her attend because we'd established a pattern of not following the rules by letting her attend for months. And when none of those tactics worked, she turned into Angry Ellen and started accusing me of discriminating against her because she was elderly and threatening to report me to our executive director, of course within earshot of others attending the program. I employed some of the strategies I outlined for you to redirect the conversation and keep it on track. I explained to Rita that residents pay taxes to our district, which entitles them to service. I asked her how she would feel if she paid for a service and wasn't able to take advantage of it because the clerk was helping someone else who hadn't paid for it. When she got aggressive, I reminded her that I had been patient and respectful while she was speaking, and that if she couldn't treat me in a similar manner, I would need to move on to help someone else and ask her to leave the room. Luckily, this last one did the trick. Once Rita calmed down, I offered to let her stay through the end of the session if she agreed it would be the last time she came. I shook her hand, thanked Rita for taking time to speak with me, and told her I looked forward to seeing her at future programs that are open to non-residents. Was Rule Bender Rita tough? You bet she was. But knowing how to work with her in advance made it a lot easier when the time came for this unpleasant conversation. Next, I'll turn it over to Stacy, who will talk to you about No Boundaries Nora. Stacy?
Thanks, Monica. Hi, everyone. The customer I'll be looking at is No Boundaries Nora. Nora is your needy customer. Nora is the customer who feels that her issue is more important than anything else going on in the world. She needs an immediate resolution and will do what it takes to be heard. She is a lot like Persistent Pam, the customer that Phil told us about. However, the difference between Persistent Pam and No Boundaries Nora is that Nora will bounce around to different staff members or even other customers in order to find someone who will listen to her or give her what she wants. Additionally, Nora will do what it takes to avoid hearing the word no. If she is discussing an issue with you, she may change her story or request in order to get what she wants. If you happen to be assertive and able to tell her no, she'll seek staff who are more vulnerable and with the hope of finding someone who will eventually say yes. Nora may follow staff around the building, and she may be oblivious to the type of difficult behavior she is demonstrating. She doesn't see her behavior as being disruptive or annoying. Because she lacks awareness, she will interrupt interactions that staff are having with other patrons, and she doesn't notice the boundary between a presenter and the audience in a program. She may interrupt the speaker to ask repeated questions or tell her story. Nora also plays the victim card when she wants to, in order to get sympathy from staff who have not yet experienced her difficult behavior. She may surround a staff member, tell them her life story, and make it difficult for them to escape. No Boundaries Nora can cause several problems in a library. Nora will make persistent contact with staff, often with the same staff member if she finds a willing listener. Oftentimes, she'll ask for you specifically, which can cause issues with your work productivity. If she feels like she has established a relationship with you, she may start to ask personal questions and become offended if you try to keep it professional. She could call consistently just to get you on the phone or visit consistently and ask to see you. And aside from disturbing staff, Nora also pesters other patrons. The effect of these issues is that you may feel discomfort, resentment, or guilt. You might fear how the person will respond if you say no. You might feel uncomfortable or guilty about speaking up. You may even question whether you have the right or deserve to set boundaries in the first place. These are cues that you need to take some action steps. Remember that you teach people how to treat you. So in order to deal with no boundaries, Nora, it's important to establish boundaries. It sounds simple enough, but how do you do that? Boundaries give you a sense of legitimate control in an interaction. They allow for a safe connection, help us clarify what is our responsibility and what is another's, and identify our personal limits. Boundaries can be physical and tangible, or they can be emotional and intangible, which are sometimes the more difficult type to set. One way to do this is to refrain from giving out your personal contact information, or even that of your fellow staff members. Nora may try to get to know you personally after feeling like she's spent enough time with you. She may ask about your family, your relationships, where you live, and even how to contact you. It's okay to say that you cannot give out that information. Be direct and clear with your dialogue. Nora might also feel comfortable attempting to contact you through social media. If she finds you on Facebook, she may friend you. And while that's a personal decision, it might be a good idea to keep professional contacts separate from your personal social media account. At the very least, make sure your settings are set to private or limited to people you have approved to follow you. It's also important to have empathy and practice your listening skills. While it's important to set your boundaries, sometimes Nora just wants to chat and may feel lonely. If you can sense that this is the case, it's okay to talk to her. But keep control of the situation and make sure she knows when it's time to stop. Another point to mention is that mental health issues could be a cause of Nora's behavior. This is a sensitive topic, and you should not attempt to diagnose her. However, attempting to understand her intentions will go a long way in dealing with her respectfully and hopefully meeting her service needs. Of course, it's not always enough to create boundaries. We actually have to follow through. Assertiveness skills are some of the most difficult skills for any library staff member. Learning to say no or be serious in your response is important in dealing with someone who can be oblivious of their behavior. If you're like me, you avoid confrontation like the plague and sometimes hope that situations will figure themselves out without your involvement. However, that's rarely the case. That's why it's important to learn to be calm, yet effective, agreeable, yet firm. In order to do this, you need to approach the situation with a dose of objectivity. Remove yourself emotionally from the issue so that you're able to communicate clearly and calmly. An assertive communicator will express their boundaries with confidence, and that sometimes means having difficult conversations. Communicate your respect and sincerity by having a firm voice and have an appropriate volume to your voice. For your body language, make direct eye contact, have an open stance, smile when it's appropriate, and make sure you're listening to what they say. It should also be mentioned that all of these skills that you are learning should then be trained to your more vulnerable staff. If you have learned these skills and are successfully handling the Noras in your library, make sure the other staff members who interact with her are as well equipped as you. So now I want to illustrate my points by discussing a specific No Boundaries Nora in my work life. My job at the library is to book and host adult and family programs. The patron in my story is a frequent visitor of our library and a frequent attendee of my program. The problem is that she has interrupted program presenters, hijacked programs, and cornered other audience members in the room to tell them her life story. She has also done this to numerous staff members. As the sole staff member in the room, it really is my responsibility to make sure the programs run smoothly, and more importantly, that our patrons feel safe and comfortable. So after one such program in which she interrupted the presenter, stood up and started talking about her life, I quietly asked to speak to her at the end of the program in private so as not to embarrass her. I politely told her that as an audience member, she needs to make sure she respects the presenter by giving them the time and platform they deserve, and that we will always have time for questions at the end. She was a little embarrassed, and I think she genuinely did not realize she was being disrupted. She apologized, and I have not had that big of an issue with her since. I was surprised to find that she wasn't really aware of her behavior and didn't want to be a nuisance. She just wasn't that self-aware, and that changed my belief in her intentions. Additionally, if I noticed that she would corner other people, I would interrupt and find a way to allow the other person to walk away. If your difficult customer is harassing other customers, sometimes it is more important to find ways to help them. You may be used to handling the behavior, but others might not be, so help them out. And after learning from that experience, I made sure to talk to my presenters before they got started, to prep them for the patron. I would let them know that we might be joined by a patron who might attempt to take over the program. And most presenters were appreciative, and they said that they are used to dealing with that and are able to take back control of the situation. I found that warning them ahead of time helped the matter. And personally, when she would corner me and tell me her story, I had to learn tactics to remove myself from the situation. I found that if I mentioned that I had to get back to work, or if I said closing statements like, "Thanks for coming today, I'll see you next time," she would respond well to the end of the conversation. So I hope that I've given you some useful tips to deal with the No Boundaries Nora in your life. Now I'd like to turn it over to Shanna, who will talk about Inappropriate Ian.
Thank you, Stacy. Hello, everyone. I have what I consider to be the unfortunate honor of introducing you to Inappropriate Ian, our final case study. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, inappropriate is defined as not right or suited for some purpose or situation. As we all know, there are a variety of behaviors which may be deemed inappropriate within a library setting, such as playing loud music, speaking on a cell phone, or even sleeping. Today, we'll focus on one subset of inappropriate behavior. That's the kind that's demonstrated by what we consider, well, the creeper, the lurker, the I don't really get a good vibe from that guy. Is that his white unmarked van in the parking lot? Patron. Hopefully, this is the patron you'll encounter the least. But when you do, he'll be the hardest to handle. So let's explore Inappropriate Ian's profile. Ian will target specific employees. He looks for the weakest link, such as those working alone or who appear easy to intimidate. For Ian, the more secluded you are, the better. A teenage shelver hidden in his back. A new librarian working the reference desk alone. The above are normal occurrences which we generally wouldn't be concerned with. But for Ian, they create the perfect opportunity for him to approach. That's not to say Ian won't target those in groups, just that it's easier for him to target solo acts. Ultimately, Ian keeps an eye out for someone he believes he can easily distract, which brings us to his next tactic. Ian loiters or leers. Have you ever looked up to find yourself making awkward eye contact with a patron sitting in a chair across the room? That's probably Ian. He also enjoys hanging out in areas where he can appear to be casually flipping through a book or magazine, but his attention is actually focused on a staff member. According to case studies in library security by Bruce Schumann, in a public library, loitering in the sense of spending time without transacting any business is generally tolerated and even encouraged. Furthermore, it is possible, and even common, to spend hours without explaining your reason for being there, justifying your presence, or even speaking to anyone. Loitering is a tough tactic to confront, which is why it works so well for Ian. Ian can also be charming. Ian may flatter, compliment, or pay you special attention, but he uses it as a mask for devious intentions. Terms of endearment, such as sweetheart, honey, or the like, are often thrown in for good measure. Before you start analyzing your numerous conversations with patrons, know that oftentimes interactions with those of another generation, culture, or geographic area may elicit these expressions as well, and are probably harmless. Ian, however, presents a special case, and his use of these terms make you feel uncomfortable. Once he's made a connection, more comments will follow, which leads to his next ploy. Ian's comments are overly personal or suggestive. When are you working again? What time do you get off? What are you doing this weekend? Are just the tip of the iceberg. Ian will address you by name and reference your appearance, personality, social life, and more. He will carefully craft his language for appeal. All the other librarians here are so old-fashioned and boring, but I can tell that you know how to have a good time. You seem tense today. When's your break so I can cheer you up? More often than not, this will be done in person, but telephone calls, emails, or other forms of communication are avenues for Ian to get your attention. Making noises, like whistling, is also possible. However, if Ian thinks you've noticed he's crossed the line, he'll remark, "Oh, I'm just teasing you," with an accompanying wink. Let me stress that not all personal comments are of a devious nature. The teenage boy who exclaims, "Girl, are you an overdue book? Because you've got fine written all over you," may be annoying, but he's not going to be an Ian. Given our work with the public, commentary is inevitable, but it's the context in which the comment is made, the perceived intent, and your gut reaction to the statement that will dictate further action. Speaking of those we interact with often, Ian will most likely be a regular. He could be a daily visitor who doesn't interact much until his desired target is alone, or he may attempt to blend in by making the rounds, allowing him to gather intel. In doing this, he could gain the trust of other staff members who may defend him if you initiate a complaint. "Oh, that's just Ian. He's so friendly. You're just not used to the attention. Some of us actually like talking to him." Harmless as he may seem at times, if Ian isn't getting the attention he thinks he deserves, or if you begin rebuffing his attempts, he may start to act out. Threats or intimidation are possible. These could lead to his last profile characteristic. Ian's actions may cross the border into sexual harassment. While there are a number of patrons we interact with who are vocal and genuine with their body language, such as those who express their thanks by initiating a handshake, patting on the back, or perhaps even a hug, Ian's movements serve a different purpose. Physical contact from Ian pushes personal boundaries. He may allow his hand to casually slide down your arm. He'll shake your hand, but he won't let go after an appropriate amount of time. He may stand closer to you than is comfortable or brush against you. These scenarios appear relatively harmless, but don't underestimate that Ian may have more bold intentions. Ian looks for ways to intrude on your personal space and time solely for his benefit, and he'll continue until he's confronted. Why is Ian a problem? He crosses lines that constitute an invasion of personal boundaries, which leaves staff feeling uncomfortable, anxious, isolated, and potentially violated. At minimum, this can disrupt workflow, but keep in mind the psychological side effects of encountering an Ian can be damaging. Staff who are affected by Ian's actions may avoid certain duties, areas, or even start skipping work altogether. I mentioned earlier that due to Ian's charm, he can sometimes gain the trust of other staff members, which makes it all the more difficult for one to handle him, especially if he's a regular. It's not pleasant to be subjected to taunts from fellow coworkers about how Ian is just overly friendly or how you're not used to attention, but it's worse to be cornered by a patron who makes you feel uneasy or threatened. Just because they haven't seen that side of Ian doesn't mean his inappropriate behavior towards you is acceptable or something you should just be used to. Depending on the tactics exhibited, Ian can be downright scary to deal with. A situation with Ian could quickly escalate if he isn't getting what he wants. So be aware of threats or any attempt at physical harm. Ian at his worst could commit a criminal offense and warrant police involvement. What can you do about Ian? First, take any pattern of offhand remarks seriously. After dealing with the public for years, many of us tend to laugh off comments of the personal variety. But if one does leave you or those around you feeling unsettled, make sure to note it. Telling Ian his behavior was inappropriate sets the stage and provides clear boundary lines. Speaking to a manager and/or filling out an incident report should occur as soon as possible. By informing others and creating a paper trail, you can protect yourself and provide clear documentation should you need to ban him or involve higher authorities. So what if you're working by yourself or the situation appears to be escalating? Go with your gut. If something tells you a patron has ill intent, make an excuse to enter a staff workroom or move near another patron and initiate a conversation. Avoid going into an elevator or public restroom because Ian could easily follow. Use your surroundings to create physical barriers. A chair or table may not seem like much, but it can keep Ian out of reach. If threats or violence start to ensue, get another staff member to radio for security, or, if necessary, have a patron call the police. While we may joke about how that one guy was giving so-and-so special attention, we need to be careful to protect ourselves from harm and understand that it is never our right to feel unsafe, offended, or threatened at work. If you're wondering whether I've ever dealt with an inappropriate Ian, the answer is yes. Before I joined the Technology Education Department, I worked the night shift at the Information Service Desk. Oftentimes, our librarian would be busy with projects, leaving me and one other female library associate to handle the traffic. Enter Ian. At first, Ian didn't say much to us, as we were new, but we caught him staring on a few occasions. After a few trial interactions, he started asking more complex questions in order to take up our time. When we offered to bump it up to the librarian, he declined and explained that he enjoyed talking to us instead. He then began more personal inquiries by weaving them into the topic of the day. Was he doing anything inherently wrong at this point? Not particularly, but I can say that both my coworker and I didn't share his sentiments and felt anxious when we'd see him walking towards the desk. We just didn't get a good vibe. The incident that turned the tide occurred when he smugly leaned over the desk, told me that I was smart as a whip, and stated that we needed to hang out soon. I responded by saying that it wouldn't be appropriate, and noticing my change in disposition, he followed up by adding, "We're just having fun here," and laughing. My coworker and I were sufficiently creeped out, but I was hesitant to do anything about it. I didn't want to create trouble for something that might be nothing. I questioned my own judgment. What if he was just joking? Perhaps I was overreacting. To make matters more complicated, this Ian was an older gentleman known by the staff. After much debate, I emailed Melissa, my then supervisor, for advice. She informed me that filling an incident report would actually be beneficial, as it would alert security to watch out for Ian's behaviors and start a paper trail should he act inappropriate again. I was lucky that Ian walked away after that comment, but the situation could have easily escalated had I been alone or circumstances were different. While we all hope that you never have to deal with an inappropriate Ian or encounter the other previously mentioned patron profiles regularly, there's always a chance that the situation could escalate. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Melissa for some tips and resources for worst-case scenarios.
Thank you, Shanna. Now that we have heard about 5 different types of customers, let's wrap this up with some training for rare situations. And I'm not just going to tell you to call your security staff. I understand that many of you may not have that resource at your fingertips. Imagine your worst case scenario with a customer. Perhaps the situation could be avoided, or perhaps not. Don't focus on the why. Instead, let's talk about what you can do to mitigate risk. Every one of the customers we talked about had at least one action that was a red flag. For Angry Alan, it was verbally abusing staff. Persistent Pam feigned ignorance to spend more time with employees and became overly friendly. Bender Rita simply thinks the rules don't apply to her and challenges staff. Boundaries Nora guilt staff into spending time with her, and pretty much everything Inappropriate Ian does is a red flag. Some customers, like Boundaries Nora, don't intentionally cause problems. Nora is just lonely Inappropriate Ian, on the other hand, is consciously behaving with ill intent. Staff should be trained to recognize these red flags and take action. Sometimes it is as simple as passing the transaction to another employee. Other times, it may be calling a manager for backup. Many of these customers are regulars. We get to know their names and can easily share a physical description. You will even find that other businesses in town, such as the post office, know these same customers by name. If the patron's behavior is serious enough that he or she is banned, make sure all staff know what to do if the patron enters the building. By having procedures in place, staff do not have to make judgment calls. The instructions are clearly stated. If Nora comes to the reference desk, call the librarian in charge. If your procedures include calling a manager, make sure you have a backup plan in case the manager is not in the building. An important piece of policy is your patron code of conduct. This document clearly outlines expected behavior in order to maintain a pleasant and safe environment. It also indicates action that will be taken if the code is not followed, such as being banned from the library. Many libraries have this document available on their website, so a simple web search will provide you with plenty of examples. Finally, if the situation becomes unmanageable or dangerous, call the police. If a banned customer refuses to leave and starts yelling, or if Inappropriate Ian assaults a customer, do not try to manage these situations. Make sure patrons and employees are safe until the police arrive. And finally, we have put together a short list of resources for you. The first three are books that you may already have in your library. Although they're definitely good for everyone, and many of you have probably heard of Crucial Conversations and its multiple variations, managers may find that they would rather read these books in full and pick out pieces from each to share with staff. The videos are ideal for all staff. We hope you find these resources useful when you encounter Angry Alan, Persistent Pam, Bender Rita, No Boundaries Nora, and Inappropriate Ian. So now let's open it up for some questions. Please use the chat box, and I will read the questions aloud, and then all of us will respond to you. Thanks, everyone.
So to give you guys, we'll give you a minute or two to think of questions. I just want to, once again thank our panelists today, and particularly for dealing with our audio problems. In my freshman year of college, I remember learning a term called techno-stress, which is a feeling of anxiety or mental pressure from involvement with computer technology. And unfortunately, with these webinars, that is sometimes the case. So thank you guys, and thanks to all our participants today for bearing with us. But I'm glad we got through it, and now we do have a little time for questions. So please, whether it's questions or observations or stories of your own, please let us know, and these guys will read them.
Okay, we did have one comment come in. This is Monica. Richie, thank you. Richie said he hasn't had any experience with an Inappropriate Ian, but as a male library worker, he's had a creepy candy. And another suggestion that he had for handling creepy candy is, even if you're not in a relationship, you can say something like, well, my girlfriend or boyfriend and I are going out this weekend. If they ask what you're doing over the weekend, or, oh, my girlfriend and I love that film, if they ask you about movies or some kind of pop culture type of thing. So that's a great suggestion. Pretending to have a significant other if you don't, or mentioning them if you do, is always another great strategy. Or wearing a wedding ring, even if you're not married, Mona. Yes, thank you. We know many folks who have feigned the vows and put on the ring to keep some potentially inappropriate Ians and creepy candies at bay.
We appreciate all your comments and questions. Keep them coming. Of course, you can follow up with us afterwards if something arises later.
And we will be making our presentation slides available to you. We're sending them to Joe along with a handout for all of you with some of the tips that we've discussed today. So those will be forthcoming.
Yep, and I'll add to that we did record today's webinar, and I think I'll do a bit of strategic editing so you all don't have to hear any feedback. If you want to listen to this again or maybe share it with your colleagues, next week sometime it'll be on the CE archives. But if you register today, I will send you a copy of the slides and handout. And I will just, particularly to what Melissa was just talking about that worst case scenario, I think if you missed Dr. Steve's webinar on challenging patrons and from someone that really has a background in security in libraries, a kind of a different perspective, I think it's a nice kind of dovetail to the content that we heard today. So again, next week if you want to check that out. But it doesn't look like yet any other questions that have come in thus far.
All right, thanks a lot, Joe, and thank you all for joining us. You'll stay online for just a few more minutes. We have a real treat for you. This is what our team has been working on for about a year now, so Stacy is going to share our Gale Toolkit resource with you.
We have one more question.
Oh, wait, hold on. We have one more question.
Sharon's chatting in a question right now.
And I see one from Kim. How do you handle obviously mentally ill people? We had a patron that keeps repeating, have a good day.
We have those here too.
If you have customers who have some kind of mental illness or developmental disability, understand this can be a really stressful situation to deal with. The best thing that you can do is keep those transactions concise, short, still be polite. If there's ever an opportunity, and we see this with some of our teens who have developmental or mental issues that are aging out of programs, if there's an opportunity for you to speak with one of their guardians or a social worker, that's definitely helpful. But I understand that may not always happen, and sometimes you just have to kind of go along with what they're doing. You can still attempt to set boundaries and say, okay, no thank you, yes, you have a nice day as well, we'll see you next time, and go from there. Monica's going to read another question that's coming in for us.
Sharon said that we've addressed this throughout to an extent, but what's the best way to deal with a situation when a patron tugs at our emotions as staff people? How do we not get sucked down into their emotions? Stacy or Phil or Shanna, Melissa, you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think this can be a pretty frequent occurrence, especially when you get to know customers. And it's not that we're necessarily overstepping the boundaries with them. We get to know their name, or oh yes, I live nearby, walking distance from the library. I think that's pretty normal. We'd like to greet our customers and have them be familiar faces, but you do have to professionally distance yourself. And this isn't even something that's taught in library school. It's just a matter of experience, in particular with customer service in general. There is a boundary between you and the customer, and you have to maintain that. And we cannot be people's therapists. And I understand if somebody's going through a rough time, we all feel it. We're very caring people in general. But you do have to distance yourself emotionally, and you can certainly provide resources for them. You can try to make connections in the community for them, but you cannot be their therapist or their best friend or their mother.
And here's another question that just came in from Kim that's kind of related. Kim wants to know, how do you have that conversation to refer someone to a social worker?
Kim, this happened to me actually fairly recently. I had a woman come into the desk, come up to us, and very quietly she just said, do you have resources about who gets what in a divorce? And you could tell right then from the question and just the kind of almost a meek way that she said it, that something else. It wasn't just, oh, we're getting a divorce. There was a lot more going on there. And as is customary at Gail Borden, I looked up the information about the book, and I walked her back to the staff. And during that time, I was able to ask if she needed anything else. And at the end, I was sure that, she had the book in her hand, certainly about the legal aspect. But I just asked her, do you need to be connected with some other resources in town? And she said, yes, that would be very helpful. And so I was able to let her know that I understood she was having some bigger issues, but I'm not a social worker and I'm not trained as one. So I think it's all in how you read the cues, and you're simply offering other resources. And even if they don't take those resources that day, that's okay. But they're still going to remember that the library's there and you're a trusted source of information. We helped her the first time, and we can help again.
Great questions. Those definitely are tough ones, because librarians and library staff, we're in a service profession. We're here because we want to help, and so finding those emotional boundaries can really be tricky. And there's empathy, and then there's becoming part of the story. And so that empathy is always a good tactic to employ, and letting someone know that you understand. And phrases like, that sounds terrible, I hope things improve for you soon, or I hope your situation gets better soon, can provide that caring touch while still kind of maintaining that barrier a bit.
All right, that looks like that's it for the questions and comments. Thank you, everyone. We do read all of your surveys and all of your comments, so we really appreciate everything that you said. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy now for our Gail's Toolkit demo.
Thanks, Melissa. So quickly, I want to run through our Gail's Toolkit website. This was built by the team that you're hearing from today. We're found at gailstoolkit.com. And this project was funded by the Carnegie Whitney Award from ALA. Our project's goal is to provide free customizable classes that you can download, and you can customize them so that you can provide technology training in your library. So the homepage, this is the homepage that lists our recently uploaded classes. So you can see that our most recent ones are LinkedIn Basics, Microsoft PowerPoint, and some Google Tools classes. And then up here, about the Toolkit section, you can read about the grant as well as the team that put this together, including all 5 of us speakers today. The Learning and Library section, this holds the grant required portion of our project. So in order to receive the award from ALA, we have to put together a bibliography. You can find a bibliography of training resources with information about instruction. The Tracks and Classes section on the website, this houses the downloadable links to all the courses offered. So you can choose what type of course you are interested in offering. It also has the class survey that you can use for any of the classes. So for example, if you want to offer a class on Microsoft Word, you just click the button and you can see the number of courses offered under each heading. And each class has a number of downloadables. So for example, Microsoft Word Basics, you'll have your design document, which is your lesson plan, your activity sheet, which includes the hands-on learning activities, your handout, which is the participant takeaway, what they can take with them, and the presentation, which is your PowerPoint presentation. And all of these documents in PowerPoint, you can customize them, you can add them, you can edit them. And so feel free to download anything on these pages. And then finally, the feedback section allows you to send us your thoughts on what we have to offer. We have to report back to ALA on the impact of our project. So if you've used the toolkit at your library, or if you have other thoughts about it, please let us know, and you can fill out the form here. So please do use our website. We built this for you, for libraries, to use and download. We figure that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've already created these materials for technology courses. So use them, please, and download at your will. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think just this is the last opportunity to ask questions, whether it was from today's content or even question about Gail's Toolkit. And I'll say you'll see at the bottom of the page that the website was sponsored by Rails. This is a project and a resource that we thought was great, a great opportunity for all those libraries out within Rails and beyond that, we know are doing some sort of technology instruction in their community. And again, that as Stacy just said, the avoidance of us all just kind of recreating the same content. Why not be able to share it? It's something that libraries forever have done well, and this is another great example. But with that, I know our time is almost up, so I just want to thank all of you again for attending, for great questions, for being patient in the beginning with our audio problems. I want to thank our great panelists today for not only this webinar, but for the series of webinars that they have done for us. And with that, I wish everybody a good rest of the week.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.